Friends, would you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There is quite a bit that we do day to day to save ourselves from suffering. All sorts of suffering, because suffering does exist on a spectrum, right? There are things that we all universally can point to and say, that is suffering. And then there are things that might not look like suffering to some people, but feel like suffering to us. It's still on the spectrum there. But we do a lot in our day-to-day, I would say, to try to keep ourselves from hurting too bad. In fact, much of modern life is designed around alleviating suffering of one kind or another, be it a concrete suffering like illness or hunger, or something a bit softer like the suffering of just being really tired when the alarm goes off in the morning and you still need to rally and get out there and get into the world. It is all around us. There are some people for whom the suffering of aging is absolutely intolerable. We hear stories in the news of scientists and millionaires throwing money and research at undoing aging, helping us to live forever one day, that none of us will have to live through that sort of suffering. And I understand that. I really get that, particularly for folks who have the means to completely curate their reality entirely, how intolerable the inevitability of our own aging is, and wanting to do anything to keep it at bay. That when you can control so many aspects of your day-to-day life to fit your liking, your preference, all things that you cannot control suddenly do become larger and larger, looming heavier and heavier, because after all, if one can master life, as so many of us do, why couldn't one master suffering as well? And I think we obsess over this, we think so much about it, because the truth is that we suffer. In some way, we all suffer. That even if we had every single material and spiritual and emotional need met at the end of the day, we are still human beings who get sick, who get hurt, who age, and who die. And even if we ourselves can be fine with that happening to ourselves, it is often the case that we are human beings who love human beings who get sick, who get hurt, who age, and who we grieve in their dying. That suffering at some point, in some way, in some measure, does indeed come for all of us. And so some people step in to try to alleviate that. They look at medication. They look at weird science treatments to try to undo aging, to try to keep us healthy and strong and young forever. And God is scratching God's head and saying, "Did you read the Garden of Eden?" And doing all of that as if the treatment, the medication, the regimen did not already exist for suffering. Not the eradication of suffering, mind you. That I contend is impossible. It would be like saying to get rid of the moon in the sky or the sun in the sky. It's there. We'll figure out what to do about it. But indeed, there is a treatment, one that smooths out the rough edges that suffering leaves behind it, one that warms its chill and thaws it out. And I would contend that it is mercy. That mercy steps in and reveals itself when suffering is observed by one of us. That it wakes up inside of us as if to declare that suffering is not the great breaker of people, But it is that through our suffering, we have a foundation of unity, something, any hope of our togetherness as a people begins there, a unified human family having this bodily experience, because mercy and suffering rise up from the same place, and it is that we share things in common with each other. From recognizing that we are the same, reaching out of our compassion and our care in mercy to each other, is this declaration that it is only an illusion that we are separate things, because watching your suffering wakes up my own knowledge of what that is within me, and oh my God, my heart grows arms and it reaches out around you because I know that. I know you because I have been you. Mercy wakes up from within us. In the midst of someone's suffering, it is mercy that sees and recognizes and affirms our wholeness to each other, to step in and to smooth and make valid our inherent wholeness, though the suffering may cause us to feel cracked, broken, shattered. Many people see suffering as an aberration, as a flaw in the system, as an interruption in what life is supposed to be like, that it gives an impression that when we suffer, for whatever reason, that we have something broken about us, that there is indeed a crack, a piece of our humanness that is missing or flawed, that something has been carved out and stolen, leaving us as less than whole. The terrible thief of our wholeness. And then mercy stirs. Mercy stirs and sees the struggle, the suffering, and says that even in that, no, you are whole. I see that in you. When the blind man cries out to Jesus, Jesus, Son of David, heal my blindness, it is without a hesitation, it is without ritual or even physical contact. Can we even say that a miracle has taken place because within the space of an exhale and an inhale, his sight is restored? He was looking for his own wholeness, the return of his sight, and Jesus says to him, it is your faith that has made you whole. And it is a faith that was not kindled in that moment, mind you. It was not a faith that sprung out fully formed right then, sitting on the street as the parade marched by. It was with him the entire time. And Jesus simply pointed to it and said, you have been whole this whole time. You have never been without it. What he needed, the blind man, was the witness, was the other person, the connection, the mercy of one of his kin to look upon him and his suffering and see that he was more than just it, and say in love and care, you are still yet whole. That though you may have felt fractured for some time, you have always been complete. And Jesus can do this, and we all can too, because he, like us, knows his own suffering. He just got finished explaining it to the disciples right before this moment. He sees the suffering of the blind man, which speaks to the center of his own knowledge, and he sees their commonality, that the bridge between them is actually quite short. In fact, is it there at all? His mercy awakens to see their sameness, and then from there, any healing, any help, any connection, any friendship, allyship, advocacy, any future for both of them, any of them, indeed all of us, is yet again possible when mercy awakens. Amen.